The letters were still warm when they reached home, carried by trembling hands, smudged with dirt and blood, written by men who no longer existed. Each one was a fragment of life, a whisper from a place where the world was ending. They came from the Eastern Front, the largest, bloodiest graveyard in human history, and they were all that remained of those who had once hoped to return. In the frozen winter of 1943, as the German Sixth Army lay encircled at Stalingrad, hundreds of soldiers crouched in dim cellars, writing their last words by candlelight. Outside, the Volga River was locked in ice. Artillery fire shattered the night, and the smell of death hung heavy in the air. One of them was Gefreiter Wilhelm Schneider, a 24-year-old infantryman from Hamburg. His hands were cracked from frostbite, his uniform stiff with grime, but his pencil moved steadily. "My dearest Anna," he wrote, "if this letter finds you, know that I thought of you until the last shell fell. Tell Mother I fought bravely. Tell Father that I tried to be the man he wanted. The Volga is near, but it might as well be the moon." The next day, Wilhelm joined a final counterattack near Red October Factory. His body was never found. Echoes across the front. Thousands of such letters from Germans, Soviets, Poles, Ukrainians, and others passed through the broken lines of the Eastern Front. They were censored, delayed, sometimes delivered years after their writers had perished. Each carried the raw heartbeat of men and women trapped in a war that devoured everything: homes, cities, and even memories. In Smolensk, Lieutenant Alexei Morozov of the Red Army wrote to his wife, Nadia, in a lull between offensives. He was 29, once a literature student before the war swept him into uniform. "Nadia, I dreamed last night of our apartment, of the smell of bread, the sound of the radio, your hair on my pillow. I woke to the sound of mortars instead. But I keep your photograph under my coat. It keeps me warmer than any fire." 2 weeks later, his regiment crossed a frozen river under German artillery. His friend later said he was last seen carrying the company's flag before being struck down. The letter reached Nadia months later, crumpled and stained, with the censor stamp still visible. The machine of silence. By 1944, the postal system of war had become both a lifeline and a weapon. The Wehrmachtsfeld Post delivered over 2 billion letters during the conflict, a staggering effort of logistics amidst chaos. On the Soviet side, the Frontovo Pismo system worked tirelessly to connect the trenches with the homeland. Censors read nearly everything, not for sentiment, but for secrets. A careless mention of unit movement or morale could be enough to confiscate a letter or have its writer punished. And yet, despite the censorship, humanity bled through every word. A Soviet nurse named Irina Kovalenko, stationed near Kursk, wrote in July 1943, "I don't know if I am saving lives or watching them fade away. The wounded come faster than we can count them. Some call for their mothers, others for God. I no longer cry, I just wash their faces." Her letters were never sent. They were found years later, tied with ribbon, in the ruins of a field hospital bombed during the retreat, frozen in time. As the German army retreated west in 1944, the letters began to take on a different tone: desperation, disbelief, resignation. For some, writing became the only way to remain human. In a snow-covered forest near Vitebsk, Oberleutnant Hans Keller, a decorated officer, wrote one final note before his unit was annihilated by Soviet armor. "We are no longer soldiers, only ghosts in gray coats. The snow covers our tracks as if we were never here. If there is another life, may it be far from this madness." He folded the note into a tin cigarette case, buried it under a tree, and was never seen again. It was discovered by a farmer in 1952. Meanwhile, in Leningrad, a young girl named Svetlana Petrovna wrote to her father, who was fighting near Lake Ilmen. "Papa, I have learned to be brave like you. Mama and I eat soup made from wallpaper now, but it's warm. Please come home soon." Her father never did. Svetlana's letter was returned after the war, marked "Recipient Missing," between fire and faith. Faith, whether in God, love, or ideology, was often the only thing that kept these voices alive. A German chaplain named Father Matthias Braun wrote to his superior in Berlin in early 1945, "I hear confessions in foxholes. Men who have burned villages now beg forgiveness. They fear not death but the silence that follows. I tell them that even in this frozen hell, God listens, though I am no longer sure he answers." On the Soviet side, Private Yuri Antonov, raised in a devout Orthodox family, scribbled in his notebook near Budapest, "They told us we fight for the motherland. But I think we fight so our mothers won't have to bury us. If I die, tell mine that I smiled." His body was buried in a mass grave. The notebook was found by a war correspondent and later displayed in a museum in Moscow. The last winter, January 1945. The Red Army was advancing toward Berlin. The Eastern Front, once a line of conquest, had turned into a corridor of death for the Germans. Villages burned, civilians fled, and the snow turned crimson beneath the boots of retreating soldiers. In the ruins of East Prussia, Sergeant Otto Weiss, a radio operator, wrote one last message before his unit surrendered. "We no longer speak of victory, only survival. The world I knew, the music, the streets, the laughter is gone. If I live, I will never again believe in flags or leaders. Only in the simple act of writing to someone you love." He placed the letter inside his helmet. It was found months later, still legible despite the bloodstains. On the opposite side, Soviet soldiers wrote home from conquered German towns, letters full of triumph and trauma. Captain Dmitry Sokolov wrote to his sister in Moscow, "We have taken a village near Königsberg. The people look at us with eyes of animals. Some beg for food. Others curse us. War has turned us all into strangers." He ended the letter with a line that captured the exhaustion of millions. "There is no victory here, only survivors." After the guns fell silent. When the war finally ended in May 1945, millions of letters still sat in postbags, undelivered. Some reached homes long since reduced to ashes. Others were found decades later, in attics, in soldiers' chests, in forgotten archives. Historians estimate that over 30 million soldiers perished on the Eastern Front. For most, the only trace left behind was their handwriting, words frozen in time. One of the most haunting collections came from Stalingrad. A bundle of letters discovered in the rubble of the Pavlov's house strongpoint contained messages never mailed. One, and signed, reads simply, "We are surrounded. We fight not for victory, but for remembrance. If someone reads this, tell them we existed." Another, written by a Soviet nurse, said, "The city burns. The wounded call for help. I will stay with them. If I do not survive, remember that I believed this was worth it." The weight of memory. Today, museums across Europe and Russia preserve these letters as fragile relics of humanity amid horror. They remind us that war is not fought by numbers or armies, but by individuals whose hearts still beat inside envelopes. In Berlin, a historian once said while holding a bundle of German feldpost. Each of these letters is a candle in the dark. Together, they form the only light we have left from that abyss. And in Moscow, an old woman, the same Nadia Morozova, now in her 90s, still keeps her husband's final letter framed above her bed. The ink has faded, but one line remains perfectly clear. If love survives this war, then nothing has truly died. Epilogue. The voices from the Eastern Front are gone, swallowed by time, buried beneath the ruins of empires. But through their letters, they continue to speak. Softly, painfully, beautifully. They tell us not about strategy or victory, but about the endurance of the human spirit, the yearning to be remembered, the courage to write even when the world collapses. The last letters were not about death. They were about life, fragile, fleeting, and forever worth writing about.